Welcome to the video on factoring trinomials with a GCF. Now, GCF stands for greatest common factor, and for short we write GCF. This is the first step in factoring. So, for factoring, you'll end up with a lot of different methods for factoring, and the first thing you always want to check in factoring is if there's a greatest common factor. So you need to factor out the GCF. That's always the first step. It helps you to simplify the factoring problem. The second step we'll discuss in another video, and then the third step of factoring is you apply the diamond problem that you learned earlier, and you'll find out in the next videos, subsequent videos, that there's actually two forms of diamond problem, but we're just apply the diamond problem you've learned so far, and that is called just the simple diamond problem. And when we get to the other type of diamond problem, we'll discuss that first. So here I have a trinomial, and it needs to be factored. So we need to write it as a product of two binomials. This one is different, and the part that makes it different is the factor here in front of the x squared. Because of this factor in front of the x squared, we cannot use the diamond problem that you've been taught. So we need to factor out this number, or we're going to try to factor out this 2 so that we can use the diamond problem and factor it. Now, the way that works is here we have the factor of 2 times x squared. Okay? Now, the 16 also has the same factor of 2 in it. I can write 16 as 2 times 8. That is same as 16, and then x. So you see that this middle term is exactly the same as I wrote over here, because 2 times 8 is still 16. Now, this last term I can also write as a product with a factor of 2, because 2 times 15, so this is the exact same thing as the 2 times 15. So I didn't change any values here, I just changed the way I wrote these numbers. Now what you have to notice here is that each term has this factor of 2. Since each term has the same factor, we can factor this out as what we call the greatest common factor. And this is how that works. The 2 goes right here, that's the common factor, you write that down first. Now everything that is left, you write in a set of parentheses as a trinomial. 2x squared plus 8x plus 15. Okay? So when I take out the 2, only the x squared is left. When I take out this 2, the 8x is left. When I take out this 2, the 15 is left. And then we close the parentheses here. Now you can always check if you did it right, because if we distributed 2 times x squared, that's my 2x squared. 2 times 8x, that's my 16x. 2 times 15, that is the 30. So we didn't really change anything. We just took the trinomial, wrote it differently, where we factored out the greatest common factor over 2. Now that you see that there's no more factor in front of this x squared here, now we can use the diamond problem to solve this problem again, just like we did before. The 15 goes into the top, that's the last term goes in the top, the middle term goes into the bottom. Now we can go up, so the x, we don't need that there, so just the 8, the middle term, 8 goes in the bottom. Now 2 numbers multiplied give me 15, added together is 8, and those are the numbers 3 and 5. Let's check. 3 times 5, that's indeed 15. 3 plus 5, that is 8. So now I can write my product here as x and an x over here. Now we have the 3, so x plus 3, and we have a 5, x plus 5. Now remember, this set of parentheses, these two binomials, is this part factored. Okay, so the 2 that we factored out earlier, that still needs to be written in front. Okay, so now this whole these two binomials multiplied times the 2 is the same as the trinomial we started off with. So this is the factored form of this trinomial. Let's do one more example. Over here you also see there's a coefficient of 6 in front of the x cubed. Wait a second, we didn't have x cubed before, so we need to, if we want to factor using the diamond problem that we've been taught, the 6 needs to be able to factor it out, but this needs to be an x squared. Okay, so let's see if we can factor out the 6 and we can factor out an x. So I'm going to write this as a product of 6 times x squared. That's the first term, because 6, there's a 6, x times x squared, that is x cubed. So this term is exactly the same as the first one, I just rewrote it. Now then the minus 36, I can write as a factor of 6, that gives me 6 times 6. The x squared, I write as x times x, because remember I want to factor out this x, so I have just an x squared. Now in order to factor out the x, I need to have an x here as well. The last term, 30. 30 I can also write with a factor of 6. 6 times 5 times x. Okay, so now we wrote everything as factored. Now what do they have in common? I've got a 6x, I've got a 6x, and over here they're kind of separated here, but I got a 6x in my last term as well. So what I get now, I can factor out the 6x because that's what each of the 3 terms have in common. And what is left, I write inside the parentheses. So I've got an x squared left, so I'll write down an x squared. Here's minus, so I'll write down a minus. I've got a 6 and an x left, so this is 6x. And over here is a plus, and I just have a 5 left in that last term. And now we have a trinomial that should start looking familiar to you, where I have a first term with an x squared, a middle term with an x, and a third term that has no variable. Or, like we saw earlier, it could have a y squared if there's a y here as well. But this is a trinomial we can factor using a diamond problem. So the last term, 5, goes in the top. The middle term, in this case negative 6, we put into the bottom. So 2 numbers multiplied gives me 5. Added together, negative 6. Those numbers are negative 1 times negative 5. Negative 1 times negative 5 is 5. Negative 1 plus negative 5 is negative 6. Okay? So now we can write the product. Now remember, this factor, the greatest common factor, we need to write down. So that's 6x. And now I'm going to write my 2 binomials. I've got an x squared. So this will make my x squared. Then a minus 1 and minus 5. So minus 1, minus 5. And this is the factored form of the original trinomial 6x cubed minus 36x squared plus 30x.